Grace and peace, y'all. Alright, so reflection. I feel like I'm going to just call these reflection Saturdays because Saturday morning is that time for me where I really sit and dig deep into my thoughts, into how things have played out for me, into decisions that I needed to make, the way they impacted my life, and how to adjust when you have to do those types of things. And it gets deep because when you really look at some of the decisions you make, and they're made from a place of open-heartedness, unconditional love, the greatest good for all involved. And sometimes you do have to put the greatest good of some over what other people may need because they aren't operating in what they need. It gets really deep. So we're going to do a reflection Saturday. And I'm going to talk about feeling trapped, because I feel like many of us feel trapped in a lot of different situations. And it's due to the way that the world forces you to think you have to operate. So let's get into it, you guys. Alright, y'all, welcome to Wisdom Became Her, that good old safe space where we go ahead and unpack our traumas so we can walk in the grace that God so lovingly gives us. If you aren't new here, welcome in. I'm happy you found a little corner of healing, because if you were guided here, God has guided you home. So go ahead and subscribe. You are family already. If you are returning, hey, so family, welcome in. You know the love is real here. So let's dive in. Alright, so as I stated, we're going to get into that feeling of being trapped, because I personally had a lot of situations within my life to make me feel trapped in scenarios due to the fact that the world states that you have no choice but to deal with them. Now, when I talk about many areas, I can say when it came to family, at one point I had a sick parent, and I gave up everything that I was doing in order to come back to be a support to her, to my mom, to my sisters, to them. And when I got there, I felt very much used. I did a lot of running around. I did a lot of self-sacrificing to make it work. And when I look back on what I was receiving for what I was giving, it was very much off balance. And it was because pushed in the world where they say, oh, you have to take care of, your family over everything. We create these dynamics, these terms that we have to stick to. And even things like my word is my bond. Now granted, you definitely should be a person of your word, but when you have to commit to things via your word because you feel you have no choice, no, the bind was your word, and then your word became your bind. So it kind of works against you. Even things like my marriage was one area that I felt very much trapped. I felt like if I exited the marriage, it meant that I had failed. It was if I left the marriage, and of course I had children, that I was removing something that my children weren't going to have. And being someone who came from a home where I had a single parent and I didn't have my father in the household, and I struggled growing up, I thought the struggle would end if the secondary parent was present. Lo and behold, the struggle existed even more because the second parent was in the household, because there was no peace in the household. So even that, being able to reflect on that, when I look back at my childhood, I could say, oh, it could have been better. It could have been worse. And that's something I feel like everyone needs to hear. They need to understand that you can look at the cards you're dealt and say these are trash cards. Or you could actually be dealt trash cards or be dealt none. Sometimes comparing your cards to what others have is the thing that messes you up even further. Because when I really look back at my childhood, the way I was raised, the way I grew up, I could have never made it. There are a lot of children who don't make it. I've seen so many terrible stories popping up on my feed lately, and this is probably something that's going to be a whole another conversational piece. But just people, just children just being taken out, and I mean in terrible ways, where it's just like, why did that have to even happen? Why did it even get to that point? So I'm very much grateful. Because where I may say, oh, this could have been better, I could poke holes in every single area. I made it. And I even tell my children, they'll say, oh, you could have had it. I wish you would have had a mom like you. And I tell them, it's because I didn't have a mom like me that I became the mom that I decided to be. And it feels good to be able to say that some people are made on their resilience. Some people are unbreakable. Some souls are unbreakable. And it is in those souls, they need to be groomed in the fire to become the best they need to be. I've given birth to 2 children, but I'm going to mother many. And that's by choice and by birthright. So thank you for the hardships. Now to get back on track, the reason why I really want to talk about the feeling of being trapped is because we try to play the game of the world with pieces that come from a game of our spiritual life. And when you start to understand how one set of rules isn't true, one set of rules is in your mind, and you're just kind of applying it to what you should be doing, you start to understand how that feeling of being trapped is even in your mind. Now I'm going to give you an example. One way that the enemy traps us here is through our children. And we don't think about it this way because a lot of times we'll accept being trapped as the way of life. When you become a parent, let's say you didn't necessarily decide to become a parent. There are situations that happen like that where you become a parent and it wasn't what you had in store for yourself. Now, in those cases, that person may feel trapped in being what another person needs in order for them to grow up healthy, grow up sustainable, or just grow up in general. And they weren't ready to perform that duty of being a teacher because they still haven't grown up. And then you have that whole syndrome of the blind leading the blind, someone who's maybe still stuck in their childhood ways, and they're trying to grow up a child who is in their childhood ways. But then you have other situations where you make a decision to be a parent. You decide that that's what you're going to do. Remember, most children have 2 parents. That's the way it's orchestrated. And you feel trapped having to allow your child access to the other parent because the world says that they deserve to have access to that child, to that other adult. Now things get a little dicey when you start playing in that area because you worry about how the world's going to perceive you. You worry about going to court. You worry about rushing back and forth, damaging your child's psyche, all types of things, the things that they're going to see, the things you don't want them to see. All those things play in your mind. When you reel it in and you sit down with your spiritual self and you have this conversation between you and God, your eyes open up very well because God is big on protecting the children. And that even means from their parents. So when you are a parent who is protecting and you have to deal with a parent that is not, God will orchestrate ways for you to walk out of that. And then you have scenarios where you choose to be a parent. You take that on as a role, as a job that precedes you, that is honorable. And in most cases, children have 2 parents. And you may have unknowingly aligned yourself with someone who wasn't even really young. Someone who, instead of being as nurturing as you intend to be to your children, they're actually detrimental to their psyche. Now, in those cases, the world makes you feel like, I'm sorry you chose wrong. Guess what? That man, that person, that woman still has access to that child. Especially if you can't prove that that child is in any sort of danger. And because the world doesn't look at how mental instability creates that instability when you get older, when you start really young, it's easy for them to overlook what is being injected into the psyche of a child. So you can feel very much trapped, have your hands tied where you're like, I have to allow access to something I know is going to be detrimental to who you are going to become. Because one person chooses to be a teacher while the other person chooses to remain a student. Now, that feeling of being trapped is something that came to me very easily this week. And it was understanding that being trapped is in the mind. And I started looking at so many different areas. Being trapped in going to work. Being trapped in, taking care of the family. Being trapped in, even when your children get older and maybe you still want to be an amazing parent, but your children have now exhibited signs that being there for them is detrimental to you. Like, you're not trapped in that role. We are here to experience and pour into those we can. And when that time has exhausted, we are to move forward. The only thing we are tied to, handcuffed to, is the Lord. So when we start thinking that we're tied to others because of the rules the world is putting in place, this is what prevents us from walking in our righteousness and our divinity with God. Because now you're completely going to bat against what you know in your mind and on paper, because you have to see it with your eyes, and what you feel in your heart and know in your soul. It gets real complicated real fast, because how do you apply rules to something that aren't written, that you know are true but aren't written, when you have rules that are written to combat it? So it got me thinking, of course there are rules that are written, right? To combat it. Who would write these rules? Who would put out rules that completely conflicted with your heart? Completely are able to work in favor of the wrong and actually tie the hands of the righteous? And of course that was a no-brainer. We know who did that. We know. But now that you know, do you still play by the rules? And that is the question. Alright, so I know a lot of you like when I bring the Holy Spirit in, let the Holy Spirit just drive this. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to let the Holy Spirit play on this. Holy Spirit, come through. Come chat with us. Why are we stuck in playing this game that the world has set for us, that is obviously set up to prevent our movement? Sorry, y'all. Three of Pentacles. To be considered a team player. Because when you don't play by the rules, everyone else will accuse you of being in the wrong. But there are some rules that were put here that aren't necessarily rules. Who creates the rules? In all honesty, it is our divine source. It is our Father. If it isn't his rules, then any rules that were created is idolization. So of course you would be accused of not being a team player if the majority is willing to play by rules that aren't true. What else, Holy Spirit? They said pull it so that they don't flip, okay. Because you know better. Because as a high priestess, you know better. If you consistently have to operate from a place of protection when it comes from what you are allowing your children to have access to, that means you've already taken that position of ensuring their safety. So if it comes up as a red flag that there are behaviors, there are things that you see that you know of that are going to be detrimental to their growth, their development, and even their psyche, it is your job to say something, because we are the protectors of our children. What else, Holy Spirit? What are other things trapping us? King of Pentacles. Funny. King of Pentacles is all about money. Yeah. And not just the person, not just the people, it's also the systems. When you change lanes and you move forward and you operate outside of the rules, the system can't benefit off of you. They can't make money off you. Because everything you do, it flows toward you. You don't have to conform. And that is one of the ways that the world kind of gets you. It gets you into these court proceedings, child support proceedings, custody battles. And it's a way of still being able to benefit off of you. So it's not just even you benefiting with the child, or the person benefiting from having a child around. Sometimes the system just benefits from both. There are so many children who are in the system, who are in group homes, who are in orphanages. And the government gets paid to house those children. Now, are they in the best situations? Of course not. Sometimes they remove them from situations and put them in worse ones. It has happened. But there's a lot of people benefiting off of you staying in the system, staying in the cycle. Alright, let me get one more. Holy Spirit, what else we got? What are other reasons you're attracted by the world? Queen of Pentacles. Ooh. I think it's both. So it's not only the king, where he gets to have control over maybe the way the woman moves. Sometimes the women, by having a child, get to have control over how he moves. So control is a huge factor on both spectrums. But regardless of any of that, it's still our job to be the nurturing spirit we're supposed to be.
Okay, why you want to put me in the chat?
Because the only way for us to grow past all of this is to recognize that some cycles need to end before new ones can begin. And that is the only way to truly make yourself success in this world. Only because as we continue to grow, you're going to find so many aspects of you keep you in this mental headspace. So when you surrender to what God has for you, the only thing you can have is success. And you know it when you get it. That was so nice. Thank you, Holy Spirit. We're going. So now that we're talking about the feeling of being trapped and how the system traps you, how do you get free? Right? Because just like I talked about, court proceedings, going, losing each other, having to go through the backlash, being accused of not playing by the rules. How do you move forward? This is when things get real dicey, y'all, because it's going to be a lot. To break free of any system is going to take a lot of willpower. But it is worth it. It's worth not having to wake up daily with the same stresses. It's worth being able to move forward without complication. But you can do it. And the reason why I know you can do it is because I will. If one person can get free, then they all can be. You just gotta want it as bad. Alright, I'm gonna leave this right here, y'all. Thank you for being here. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like it. Do those things. Comment. Let's chat. And also forward it to somebody you know who may be feeling trapped, who may be feeling like their hands are tied, they're stuck in a situation, they can't get out. Send it to them. Have them comment so we can chat about it. And I'll tell them how to break free. I love you all. Love and light, y'all. Thank you.